The shadow of whispers. Beneath the pallid glow of the harvest moon, a soft rustling broke the fragile silence of Vale Hollow. The chill in the air carried more than just an autumn breeze. It whispered secrets long buried, secrets that clawed at the edges of sanity. Olive Everhart stood at the threshold of what remained of the Norwood Estate, its crumbling facade a ghost in the night, a silent witness to the sins that had stained its walls in crimson. She had come not just to explore, but to confront the shadows of her past, echoes of a childhood fraught with the terrors of her imagination. And yet, she suspected that the estate held more than mere memories. It harbored a presence as ancient as the trees that sprawled around it, a presence that seemed to breathe with her every step. As she crossed the threshold, the air thickened, laden with dust and despair, the scent of mildew creeping into her lungs. Olive's heart raced, a wild drum in her chest, the echo of each beat a reminder of why she had returned. 5 years had passed since her father disappeared without a trace, swallowed by the very darkness that now beckoned her deeper into the abyss. The young woman shifted her weight from one foot to another, her trembling fingers clutching the flashlight that flickered like the waning hope she carried. Suddenly, a gust of wind pushed through the broken windows, rattling shutters that hung precariously, as if they were trying to speak, to warn her. "Welcome back," they seemed to whisper, though Olive would not acknowledge it. She wouldn't allow the memories to trickle in just yet. Instead, she focused on the ground beneath her, the uneven cobblestones, overgrown with weeds, a testament to the neglect that had befallen this hollow shell. With resolve, she stepped into the cavernous room, where the scent of decay lingered like an uninvited guest. The floor creaked beneath her, a warning that she was intruding on sacred ground. Shadows danced against the walls, long and unnatural, twisting into grotesque shapes that clawed at the edges of her vision. Yet, in that fractured light, the remnants of life remained, dust-covered furniture draped in white sheets, and the demonic portrait of her forebear, Alexander Norwood, a hollow-eyed specter watching over his domain with a lurking hostility. Inhaling slowly, trembling with anticipation, Olive recalled the stories her mother had told her to ward off the nightmares, the guests that faded away, the laughter that turned to screams. They were mere bedtime tales, she thought, nothing more than products of an overactive imagination, a shield against the darkness. But now, standing in life's cruel theater, she couldn't shake the persistent thoughts that skittered across her mind, reminded of the day her father left the estate just like everyone else. Disappeared. The truth was her mother had never returned to Vale Hollow either, her eyes haunted and vacant whenever the estate loomed back into their life. Chalking it up to cowardice, Olive scolded herself. Wasn't she the brave one who ventured forth against the memories? Yet with each step she took deeper into the house, shadows seemed to coalesce around her, thickening into a tangible fog that stirred echoes of whispered conversations and muffled cries. Curious, she trudged onwards, her flashlight illuminating the walls only to reveal more questions. What had happened to her family? Where had they gone? Her heart raced, and the air grew damper, almost claustrophobic. With only a guttural growl from the old house to keep her company, Olive turned left into an adjacent room, one she remembered from her youth. Tattered curtains fluttered like spirits as she approached the arched windows, cracks radiating out from their edges, mirroring her fractured memories. It was here she had seen her father last, perched in a chair, scribbling intently into a notebook that now lay abandoned, dust-covered and spectral, on the floor. The air was suddenly still, smothering, as she knelt beside it, her pulse echoing loudly in her ears. With careful hands, she picked it up, the leather spine cracked and peeling, and opened it to the first page, ink scrawled in hurried bursts, a madman's desperate ramblings. "Listen to the whispers," it said, "for they will lead you to truth." Her breath caught in her throat. Truth or terror? She couldn't tell. The weight of what that might mean hung over her like a dark cloud. It was at that moment a creaking floorboard sent chills racing down her spine. Olive spun around quickly, the flashlight beam panning across the room until it locked upon a shadow, briefly. Just a flicker, but unmistakable. Olive's throat tightened. Heart pounding against her ribs, she whispered, "Hello? Father?" Silence was her only reply. Doubts uncoiled within her, but fueled a fierce urgency. She had to uncover what had happened, or risk waking nightmares she dared not confront. Escaping the room, she stumbled back into the hallway when suddenly she felt it. A presence. Cold fingers tightened on her arm, sending sparks of electricity through her veins. She yanked back, startled, and the sensation vanished as quickly as it had come. "Breathe," she reminded herself, but the sinister atmosphere layered her thoughts with dread. Rushing past the fading memorabilia of a life long gone, Olive found herself in the expansive kitchen, where time had painted everything in shades of anguish. The tables appeared laid for a feast never to be. Blackened pots stood like sentinels on the hearth, and the air felt thick with suffering. It was here she caught sight of the cabinet. That one single cabinet that had always been slightly ajar, a secret holding its breath, waiting, gripping the handle as if grasping desperately for life. She flung it open, and dust burst forth like a ghost emerging from its sleep. Inside lay nothing but a single ornate box, adorned with sinister carvings of intertwined vines and faces twisted in torment. She hesitated, the heaviness returning to her chest. Could this be the object of her father's madness? Something powerful, something that had led him to madness? Time stretched and twisted as she reached inside, fingers brushing over its wooden surface, feeling the vibrations, a distant pulse beneath her skin. What lurked within? Olive was repulsed, yet drawn like a moth to a flame. With trembling hands, she opened the box to reveal an assortment of trinkets and a mirror. The surface was black as pitch, unreflective as a void, yet an unsettling energy crackled around it. Her breath quickened. The night seemed to close in, the shadows wrapping around her like a lover before darkness swallowed her whole. The mirror's surface rippled as she peered closer. Olive gasped, not recognizing her own face, but instead, a figure hovering behind her, pale and ethereal, a grin stretching unnaturally wide across a ghastly visage engulfed by shadow. Nothing human existed in its gaze, just a void of hunger. Hysteria clawed at her insides as she stumbled backward. "Olive," it hissed, a voice that shattered the stillness. A single word imbued with both her name and her doom. Staggering back, she crashed into something solid. The air grew thicker than before, twisting her stomach as she turned, eyes darting frantically to the entrance, where an ominous figure swathed in darkness stood, bathed in the moon's light. A specter born of her fears, as if the world had conspired against her. Olive darted back towards the kitchen door. With every stride, she felt the pull of the darkness, sinister, grasping. The realization that she was not alone tore through her mind. It was a warning she knew too well. This house swallowed those who came too close to its heart, those who sought to unveil the truth. Outside, the starlight had vanished beneath a suffocating blanket of clouds. Thunder rumbled in the distance, heralding the storm that was brewing. Beneath the fading light, soulless eyes seemed to peer through the windows, watching, waiting. "No," she whispered, convincing herself that fear had woven its tale too deeply. But as she stepped into the open air, the estate groaned behind her, alive with a fury she had awakened. Her pulse raced as she made her escape, the world around her shrinking into a cage of despair. And with each step, she fought against the primal instinct to flee. But night stretched infinitely, darkened corners concealing threats more dreadful than her imagination. A truth so potent that reason itself could unravel. She had to find a way to conquer the shadows that haunted her, or risk becoming a captive, ensnared in the web of her family's past. That in the heart of Vale Hollow, where all hopes dimmed, whispers began anew. Follow them, they chorused, a symphony of voices luring her back, teasing her with promises laced in dread. Olive paused at the threshold, a tempest brewing within her. "What truths do they hold?" she murmured, and the answer emerged not with words, but with piercing eyes and anguished moans that spoke of blood and inheritance. Nightmares lapped at her heels faster than her resolve. Pushing through the thick foyer, she clutched the box. Pigeonholed by its evocation, she understood that within lay the key to unlocking the estate's heart, and perhaps releasing a soul, the lost fragments of her father. Fear gripped tightly, but determination hoisted her towards awakening the darkness rather than surrender. Staring into its shadowy depths, Olive's breath stilled. "I'll find you," she hissed into the void, spurred by something greater, a need to cleanse the darkness consuming this hollow echo of a once vibrant home. Olive Everhart had come to confront her demons, and beneath the dim-lit heavens, the shadows circled tighter. Only the foolish dared enter. Only the brave could hope to escape unharmed. In a bold moment, she thrust her hands into the box again, delving blindly to unearth the last vestiges of her family's history, the sins of her ancestry, the objects whispering tales long obscured. Snapshots of their lives started to reveal themselves, curling an insidious grip around her consciousness. Nightmarish visions flashed before her, wine-stained banquets where laughter twisted into screams, shadowy figures merging into a tapestry of blood and betrayal written in time's relentless passage. And right then, in the eye of the storm, she understood. The whispers she'd long feared were not just remnants. They were calls of the lost. The cries of souls ensnared in secrets that extended far beyond her bloodline, anchoring them eternally to the estate, eternally to the shadows. What she had thought to escape had woven itself into her very being. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to Storyetional, where every story takes you deeper into the shadows. Your support helps keep the fear alive. And trust me, there's so much more to uncover. Now, let's step back into the darkness, shall we? "Help me." The words escaped her lips, a prayer relinquished to the dark. Would they respond? Would they grant her the strength she needed to preserve the lucid shreds of her identity and break free from the eternal echo of Vale Hollow? It was then that the air boiled over as shadows surged, pouring from the well of despair, swirling around her, faces wailing in mute agony. Desperation clawed at her heart, and she stumbled back into the darkened world, each breath stale and stinging as reality warped. Figures encroached, rooting themselves into the depths, thrumming with the memories locked in the house's spine. At the moment when she believed she would be devoured by her family's darkness, a new whisper rose above the cacophony, familiar, resonant, and heartbreakingly human. "Olive," it beckoned, soft, inviting her into a remembrance. Her father's voice, the haunting thread of love that spurred her on even as the shadows screamed in contest. "They need you," he persisted, drawing her deeper into the melee of tortured faces, into their realm, a space between existence and darkness. Picking up the remnants of courage, Olive shoved her fears down, plunging into the thick of them. She would not be swallowed. This was the chance to find a way back. As she clasped the object her father had left behind, Each pulse reverberated with a wall of shadows crashing around her like an unrelenting tide, dreadful yet alluring, a dance of life and death intertwined. She felt the truth shimmer in her hands, the power of her lineage coursing around her, invigorating, a shield wrapping her in warmth. "Show me!" Olive cried out once more, unleashing that divine spark within her being as she turned toward the storm raging behind her eyes. The shadows screeched, a terrible wail of anguish and recognition that echoed through Vale Hollow, wresting loose the chains binding their sorrow for all its generations. In a moment suspended by silence, the shadows shrieked a final time, their screams rising towards the heavens before fracturing into jagged pieces of themselves. Wisps of darkness mingled with the silver light of the moon, drifting like ash settling into the ground, leaving behind a path, a radiant thread leading to the exit. Part of the house recoiling at the revelation gathered through whispered legacies. It could no longer devour what it could not possess. Immersed in the pulse of ancestral strength, Olive stepped forth through the remnants, past the tight embrace of secrets as they retreated. Each corner she turned urged her closer, a heartbeat thrumming against her chest, guiding her home. Breaching the door to the world beyond, sunlight emerged unfiltered, surrounding her, washing away the malignancy that had kissed the estate for far too long. There, at the precipice, Olive could still hear their whispers, softening into sighs as a sense of release began. Victory wrung from the very fibers of despair. She was no longer their vessel, nor their victim, but the herald of their freedom, their truth set upon her shoulders. Vale Hollow behind her stood resolute and quiet, silence now lingering like a crumbling monument, a haunting shadow in her mind, yet no longer a source of fear that as radiant dawn broke overhead. Olive stepped across the threshold toward the awaiting world, darkened memories slowly being sifted away like sand in the wind. The chains of her lineage would not ensnare her. Instead, they whispered a promise of warmth, resilience, and hope. Through the course of her journey, she discovered the hidden power of stories yet to be told, a tapestry of horror interwoven with triumph that defined the very nature of existence. Now, they lay as fragile truths in the corners of tangled dreams, each tale a reminder not merely to remember, but to share. Happy endings could bloom even amid the grotesque. If you've enjoyed my story, don't forget to give a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Olive breathed, a gentle smile marking the edge of her lips as the shadows slipped seamlessly from view. And subscribe to Story Essional for more tales that linger long after the pages have closed. In that, the promise weaved itself between starlit nights and shadows, a new beginning unfurling, bringing life to narratives that united souls, binding them, not with chains, but bonds of truth that anchored on the journey shared. Life was a continuous loop, and within it, every story held a lesson, every shadow a whisper. In the fading echoes of Vale Hollow, love, legacy, and resilience clung fiercely against the dark, a promise that would linger long, haunting perhaps, but transforming anguish into strength and shadows into light. Beneath the pallid glow of the harvest moon, a soft rustling broke the fragile silence of Vale Hollow. The chill in the air carried more than just an autumn breeze. It whispered secrets long buried, secrets that clawed at the edges of sanity. Olive Everhart stood at the threshold of what remained of the Norwood Estate, its crumbling facade a ghost in the night, a silent witness to the sins that had stained its walls in crimson. She had come not just to explore, but to confront the shadows of her past, echoes of a childhood fraught with the terrors of her imagination. And yet, she suspected that the estate held more than mere memories. It harbored a presence as ancient as the trees that sprawled around it, a presence that seemed to breathe with her every step that as she crossed the threshold. The air thickened, laden with dust and despair, the scent of mildew creeping into her lungs. Olive's heart raced, a wild drum in her chest, the echo of each beat a reminder of why she had returned. 5 years had passed since her father disappeared without a trace, swallowed by the very darkness that now beckoned her deeper into the abyss. The young woman shifted her weight from one foot to another, her trembling fingers clutching the flashlight that flickered like the waning hope she carried. Suddenly, a gust of wind pushed through the broken windows, rattling shutters that hung precariously as if they were trying to speak, to warn her. "Welcome back," they seemed to whisper, though Olive would not acknowledge it. She wouldn't allow the memories to trickle in just yet. Instead, she focused on the ground beneath her, the uneven cobblestones overgrown with weeds, a testament to the neglect that had befallen this hollow shell. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to Story Echelon, where every story takes you deeper into the shadows. Your support helps keep the fear alive, and trust me, there's so much more to uncover. Now, let's step back into the darkness, shall we? With resolve, she stepped into the cavernous room, where the scent of decay lingered like an uninvited guest. The floor creaked beneath her, a warning that she was intruding on sacred ground. Shadows danced against the walls, long and unnatural, twisting into grotesque shapes that clawed at the edges of her vision. Yet, in that fractured light, the remnants of life remained, dust-covered furniture draped in white sheets and the demonic portrait of her forebear, Alexander Norwood, a hollow-eyed specter watching over his domain with a lurking hostility. Inhaling slowly, trembling with anticipation, Olive recalled the stories her mother had told her to ward off the nightmares, the guests that faded away, the laughter that turned to screams. They were mere bedtime tales, she thought, nothing more than products of an overactive imagination, a shield against the darkness. But now, standing in life's cruel theater, she couldn't shake the persistent thoughts that skittered across her mind, reminded of the day her father left the estate just like everyone else. Disappeared. The truth was her mother had never returned to Vale Hollow either, her eyes haunted and vacant whenever the estate loomed back into their life. Chalking it up to cowardice, Olive scolded herself. Wasn't she the brave one who ventured forth against the memories? Yet with each step she took deeper into the house, shadows seemed to coalesce around her, thickening into a tangible fog that stirred echoes of whispered conversations and muffled cries. Curious, she trudged onwards, her flashlight illuminating the walls only to reveal more questions. What had happened to her family? Where had they gone? Her heart raced, and the air grew damper, almost claustrophobic. With only a guttural growl from the old house to keep her company, Olive turned left into an adjacent room, one she remembered from her youth. Tattered curtains fluttered like spirits as she approached the arched windows, cracks radiating from their edges, mirroring her fractured memories. It was here she had seen her father last, perched in a chair, scribbling intently into a notebook that now lay abandoned, dust-covered and spectral on the floor. The air was suddenly still, smothering, as she knelt beside it, her pulse echoing loudly in her ears. With careful hands, she picked it up, the leather spine cracked and peeling, and opened it to the first page, ink scrawled in hurried bursts, a madman's desperate ramblings. "Listen to the whispers," it said, "for they will lead you to truth." Her breath caught in her throat. Truth or terror? She couldn't tell. The weight of what that might mean hung over her like a dark cloud. That IT was at that moment a creaking floorboard sent chills racing down her spine. Olive spun around quickly, the flashlight beam panning across the room until it locked upon a shadow, briefly. Just a flicker, but unmistakable. Olive's throat tightened, Heart pounding against her ribs, she whispered, "Hello? Father?" Silence was her only reply. Doubts uncoiled within her, but fueled a fierce urgency. She had to uncover what had happened, or risk waking nightmares she dared not confront. But as she ventured deeper into the estate, each room revealed fragments of a family history twisted by horror. Dark secrets lay cloaked in dust and despair. An abandoned nursery with a child's ragged toys, the remnants of laughter trapped in still air, and a study where the light of understanding had turned to shadow. Every corner turned revealed more. Scraps of letters, photographs with faces scratched out, laughter that once echoed, now twisted into silence. But with every path she chose in the house, the boundaries of reality began to strain and fray, warping into illusions that whispered of the past and beckoned with promises of the future. Soon, she would learn that to learn the truth would mean confronting the deepest darkness that clung to her lineage, awakening echoes of anguish that could not remain silent if she sought to find her father and reclaim her own voice against the shadows. That Olive's heart raced as she stood frozen in the nursery, her eyes swept across the dust-laden room, haunted by remnants of her childhood. The sunlight that struggled to penetrate the grime of the window cast an ethereal glow, illuminating the edges of a rocking horse, its paint chipped and faded, waiting in silence for a child that never returned. A sudden rush of memories flooded her, a time when laughter echoed through these halls, and fear was a mere shadow lurking at the periphery. Tentatively, she stepped closer to the rocking horse, brushing her fingertips over its surface. It felt cold, and a shiver danced up her spine. The atmosphere thickened with unspoken words, the suffocating silence alive with echoing whispers that seemed to float just beyond her understanding. "Where are you?" she murmured, though she doubted the walls had answers. Instead, the air responded only with a faint rustling, like a soft sigh escaping from the depths of a suffocating darkness. Turning on her flashlight, she pointed the beam toward the corner where a faded doll lay abandoned, its button eyes glinting like tiny obsidian marbles in the dim light. Olive approached, drawn to it as if compelled by an unseen force. She knelt down beside the doll, thumbing the tattered dress and twisted hair. "What happened here?" she whispered to it, perhaps hoping for some acknowledgement. But instead of a reply, she felt it, a shift in the air, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Olive's instincts screamed at her to leave, yet a strange resolve held her firmly in place. She felt a pull towards understanding, as if the very fabric of her family history was woven into the fibers of this decrepit home. Breathing deeply, she closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on the whispers beneath the surface of her thoughts. "Bring me the truth," she silently pleaded, desperate for clarity amid the confusion. The flashlight flickered, casting jittery shadows around the room. In the corner of her vision, she caught movement but turned quickly to find nothing there. Heart pounding, she stood upright, every nerve ending alive with anticipation. "Focus, Olive," she chided herself, shaking her head to dispel the prickling anxiety. She needed to find her father's notes, his thoughts on the shadows that plagued him. They were here, a sanctuary of secrets waiting to engulf her. No more distractions. Olive exited the nursery, her determination rekindled, and ventured down the narrow hallway, each step absorbing the eerie ambience. The walls were adorned with portraits of her ancestors, their painted eyes following her as she walked. A chill enveloped her as if they were silently accusing her of trespassing into their realm. But she pressed on, unwilling to turn back now. Another door stood ajar, its creaking hinges beckoning her closer. This room was initially her father's study, a sanctum where he concocted grand stories and scribbled his musings. Olive pushed the door open and stepped inside, her breath hitching at the sight that awaited her. The room was an amalgamation of chaos and order, a testament to the man who once inhabited it. Books lay sprawled on the floor, pages yellowed and edges frayed, while the desk stood littered with papers, notes, and what appeared to be sketches of grotesque figures with elongated limbs and shadowy faces. She flicked on her flashlight again, illuminating the chaos in front of her. Pulling on her curiosity like a thread, she shuffled through the piles of paper, her eyes scanning the chicken scratch of her father's handwriting. The whispers, one note read, "A curse that consumes." She frowned, the words dancing ominously in her mind. What did he know? The longer she lingered in the study, the more she could feel the shadows tugging at her consciousness, urging her to leave. The air felt heavier still, charged with a palpable unease, as if something lurked just beyond the veil of reality. Desperately sifting through the notes, she stumbled upon a more comprehensive journal, its cover cracked, but the pages surprisingly intact. The title etched upon the first page sent cold shivers through her veins, The Norwood Legacy. Flipping it open, she began to read. The entries detailed her father's dive into the history of the Norwood family, a lineage entwined with dark folklore and unspeakable tragedy. Each paragraph painted a grim picture of cursed relatives lost to madness, their names overshadowed by whispers of the unseen. The deeper she delved, the more she learned of the vile entity, an ancient creature born from fear and despair, thriving on the suffering of the living. As she turned the pages, the words became frantic, unveiling a narrative that mirrored her descent into the abyss of the estate. The journal described harrowing experiences, parents losing their children, the feeling of being watched, voices calling from the shadows, and the price that had to be paid to silence the whispers, a sacrifice of blood. It is said the entity feeds on fear, grows stronger with each drop of despair. Olive's breath hitched as she repeated the words. They echoed against the walls, suffocating her with dread. In that moment, a sound erupted in the hallway, a soft, fleeting whisper intertwined with a faint rustle of fabric. Startled, she looked toward the doorway, the flashlight's beam trembling. Was someone there? Her heartbeat thundered as she edged cautiously towards the threshold. Peering out, she saw only shadows, just the house. Olive breathed, willing the anxiety to fade and pushing through the door's threshold. Yet as she stepped outside the room, a draft slipped past, a whisper brushing against her ear, a fragment of a voice that felt hauntingly familiar and yet entirely foreign. It sent an icy chill down her spine. Listen, the command resonated within her, urging her forward. But this time, it didn't feel like just the house, not at all. She followed the sounds, almost instinctively, down the winding hallway until she reached the grand staircase. The whispers intensified, weaving around her like mist, pulling her onward. At the foot of the stairs, she hesitated, glancing back at the study, a sanctuary suddenly corrupted by an unknown malevolence. Swallowing her fear, Olive descended as she reached the bottom. The whispers crescendoed into audible words, chaotic and desperate. Help us find the truth. Her mind reeled, and she felt the weight of their anguish pressing down against her chest. Below her, the living room was shrouded in darkness, shadows dancing with hysteria. She could make out the contours of furniture, warped by the lack of light, the air thick with an ancient sadness that wrapped around her like a shroud. In the center of the room, a dim light flickered, beckoning her like a will-o'-the-wisp. It pulsed softly against the stillness, revealing the outlines of long-forgotten memories. Old family photographs scattered across a worn coffee table. Olive stepped closer, drawn to the luminous glow. It illuminated a cluster of faces, her relatives, wearing expressions that betrayed glimpses of joy muddled with unimaginable sorrow. Suddenly, the light flickered violently, and the temperature in the room dropped. Her breath misted before her like spectral smoke, and the whispers transitioned to wails of pain. "Free us! Free us!" they clamored, echoing within the recesses of her mind, carving a place there that would not easily fade. Gazing across the table, her heart sank as she spotted a familiar photograph, herself as a child, cradled in her father's arms. But next to it lay an eerie picture, one that froze her in place. It portrayed an empty room, the nursery, taken at twilight, where her father had been silhouetted against the window, his expression tormented, lost in a world of his own creation. In the background, she swore she saw shadowy figures gathering, waiting that a darkness pooled beneath her feet, pulsating like a heartbeat, threatening to pull her under. Panic surged within her. This was more than she had bargained for. Shakily, she turned away, but was caught off guard when a familiar voice whispered her name. "Olive. Father?" She spun around, the tremor of fear lacing her voice. A figure stood at the edge of the light, obscured and hauntingly familiar, a shadowy echo of the man she had known. "Is it you? Don't look back. You must find the truth." His voice emerged, both frantic and pained, yet distorted, as if filtered through layers of despair. "They are here, Olive. They need you." His form flickered, wavering between the dimensions of chaos and clarity. "What do you mean? What do they need?" she cried, her voice breaking as she instinctively took a step closer, desperate to understand, desperate to reach him. But he began to fade, the darkness around him thickening. "You must confront." Suddenly, the light swallowed him whole, extinguishing his figure, dragging her father's voice into the cold void. And with one final echo, the walls trembled with silent screams. "Identify the sacrifice, and you will break the cycle." Just as the words left the ethereal R, darkness surged forth, swallowing the shimmering glow around her. Olive staggered back, terror coursing through her veins as the shadows took shape. The agitated cries became a cacophony of wails, spirits of those lost in the depths of the estate yearning for release. They wreathed around her, their despair palpable. They craved acknowledgement, purpose, and she understood. She was their vessel, their tether to the world. With resolve igniting her spirit, Olive stepped closer to the flickering remnants of light, refusing to succumb to the darkness. "I will find a way," she shouted over the clamor, her voice echoing defiantly against the walls. It felt as if the very foundations of the house trembled in response. "I will free you." But at that moment, a wave of chilling fear overtook her, causing the shadows to close in. The air crackled with anticipation. She could sense the boundary fracturing, yet she stood firm, pushing through the veil of darkness that threatened to engulf her. It was now or never. She would confront the whispers, unmask the truth buried within the estate's core. As she gathered her courage, the shadows seemed to retreat, offering her a passage deeper into the abyss that lay ahead, a depth that held unfathomable horrors and the key to unlocking the curse that bound them. With one final glance at the photographs, Olive spread her arms wide and followed the tendrils of darkness ahead, resolute in her mission. The house may try to break her, but she wouldn't falter. For every secret it held, each whisper would bring her closer to salvation. Olive stepped into the dense shadows, drawn forward by an inexplicable compulsion. The whispers became a symphony of anguish and hope, swirling around her, urging her onward as if fueling the fire of her determination. She threaded her way through the darkened expanse, the air thickening with an ancient energy that clung to her skin like a heavy cloak. As she moved deeper into the heart of the Norwood Estate, Olive encountered an array of haunting landscapes, long-abandoned rooms that bore the weight of 1,000 sorrows. She pushed through dust-covered doorways, each room revealing fragments of a bygone era. Faded photographs, tarnished silverware, a cracked mirror that reflected the solemnity of her quest. Each piece whispered tales of love, loss, and despair. "Where do I find you?" she breathed, feeling the invisible gaze of the restless spirits growing heavier on her shoulders. "What do you want from me?" The shadows flickered in response, coiling as if anticipating her next move. An unsettling sense of urgency surged through her, urging her to uncover whatever dark secret lay at the center of it all. As she pressed on, a familiar chill skittered across her spine. It felt like a warning. Suddenly, she found herself at the entryway to the cellar, an ominous door that loomed before her. It was slightly ajar, creaking softly on its rusted hinges as if beckoning her closer. The whispers intensified into a haunting chant, their tones mingling with the low growl of the wind that curled around the estate, casting an ethereal glow just beneath the surface of her fear. "You have to confront it," she whispered to herself, summoning the resolve born from the strength of her ancestors. Gathering her breath, she pushed the door further open, the scent of damp earth and mold wafting up to greet her. With her flashlight piercing the darkness, she descended the worn stone steps, each creak of the floor echoing in the hollow space below. The cellar opened into a vast chamber, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb above that swayed from the ceiling like a dying star. Olive squinted against the gloom, her heart racing as she scanned the room. Old crates and barrels lay piled haphazardly, creating an obstacle course of memories hidden beneath layers of dust. In the center of the room stood a wooden table, dark and stained, its surface marked by deep cuts and scratches, remnants of a history steeped in ritual and secrecy. Approaching the table, she noticed what appeared to be a book, its spine cracked and pages yellowing. Olive's breath hitched as she gently brushed her fingers across the cover, revealing intricate symbols and a title that sent chills through her: The Notebooks of Shadows. This was the journal of her ancestor, the one who first encountered the entity that now haunted their lineage, a chronicle of madness and obsession. With trembling hands, she opened the book, revealing page after page filled with frantic scrawls, records of rituals, names of sacrifices, and grotesque illustrations of the dark entity that haunted their family. One passage caught her eye. To break the curse, blood must bind the past and present. The one who links both realms must become the vessel. In the confrontation lies the key. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to Storyetional, where every story takes you deeper into the shadows. Your support helps keep the fear alive. And trust me, there's so much more to uncover. Now, let's step back into the darkness, shall we? Her fingers trembled over the words, a realization dawning upon her. "I am the vessel," she whispered, the weight of her ancestry slamming down upon her shoulders. The shadows of her past had always loomed large, but now they transformed into a desperate plea for liberation. "But what do I have to do?" As if in response to her question, a gust swept through the cellar, causing the pages of the book to flutter wildly. The whispers grew louder, cacophonous shrieks that echoed within the chamber, urging her to enact the ritual described within. Hesitantly, she gathered the ingredients mentioned, various objects piled around the room that felt integral to the unfolding ritual. A small vial of salt, a relic from a long-forgotten family member's grave, and a candle, its wax yellowed but still intact. Her heart raced as she arranged them upon the table, recalling her father's frantic notes on binding the entity to the earthly realm. Once everything lay in place, she paused, gathering her courage. "What binds must be broken," she recited, her voice stronger now, cutting through the darkness. "I am here to confront you." Her heart swelled with an intoxicating mix of fear and resolve, the shadows thickening around her as she prepared for the unknown. She took a deep breath and ignited the candle, its flame flickering defiantly in the enveloping gloom. As she invoked the incantation suggested within the book, a whirlwind of emotion coursed through her. "Spirits of the Norwood Estate, I call upon the strength of those who walked this path before me. Lend me your power to face the darkness that has ensnared us all." The air vibrated with energy as an otherworldly silence blanketed the cellar. The shadows began swirling, forming a vortex that coalesced before her, a manifestation of fear and despair. The temperature dropped sharply, as if the very essence of the room were being stripped away, revealing the raw, pulsating heart of the malevolence that fed upon sorrow. Suddenly, the entity emerged from the vortex, its shape twisting and contorting, a mass of darkness with eyes that glowed like embers, seething with rage and pain. It loomed over Olive, its presence suffocating, filling her with dread. "You dare challenge me, child?" it hissed, its voice a sinister symphony of malice and despair. "I do," Olive replied, forcing herself to stand tall, though her heart threatened to break free from her chest. "I refuse to let you continue this cycle of torment. You feed on fear, but I bring light." The entity snarled, lunging toward her, but Olive held firm, summoning every ounce of strength coursing through her veins. "I am the bridge between our worlds. I will not falter," she shouted, the volume of her voice building as she drew from the shadows of her ancestors. They stood with her, their whispers becoming a cacophony of defiance to end that moment. She plunged her hand in her pocket, clutching the vial tightly, feeling the cold glass against her palm. "By the blood that bind us, by the names that echo through time, I cast you out." She poured the salt fiercely around her, creating a protective barrier as she continued the incantation, knowing it was now or never. The shadows recoiled, hissing as the salt burned. "You think you can free them? You think you can banish me?" The creature shrieked, its visage distorting in agony. "You are but a child. I am the answer to your curse," she yelled, summoning every last remnant of her family's strength and hope. "Let the truth be revealed." The flames of the candle surged, dancing wildly in response to her words. The air crackled with energy as the vortex erupted, flashing with flickers of long-lost memories of her ancestors, each face a testament to their pain, their shadows merging with the light in a striking display that echoed through time. "Free us!" Their voices rang in unison, cascading through the basement until the walls trembled. "We are bound by your blood, by your will." Olive felt their strength pierce through her, their voices wrapped around her, harmonizing with her own. With one final cry, Olive thrust her arm forward, the light intensifying until it burst forth with a blinding brilliance, bathing the room in pure, radiant energy. The entity shrieked, unraveling under the force of the combined will of her family's spirits, the shadows collapsing in on themselves until the darkness was no more. As the brilliance dissipated, Olive collapsed to her knees, overwhelmed by an intoxicating sense of freedom that washed over her. The whispers transformed into soft sighs of relief, echoing gently around her. She looked around the now silent cellar, her heart racing with the knowledge that she had done it. She had confronted the darkness and broken the cycle. But as the shadows faded, something tugged at her, a lingering essence that refused to be fully released. She glanced to the table where the notebooks of shadows lay and noticed a new phrase scrawled across the final page, only visible in the aftermath of her confrontation. "In the light of truth, a new path is forged." Olive's curiosity piqued. There was more to uncover. She could sense it deep within her bones, the pull of a larger narrative that had yet to unfold. With new determination, she regained her composure and gathered the notebooks. Her journey was far from over. This was just the beginning. Swallowing the remnants of fear, she unfolded her plans. The Norwood legacy was intertwined with the very fabric of what she was destined to discover, and she would not shy away from it. She would delve deeper, unearthing the truths that bound her family. Not just the shadows of the past, but the promise of a future illuminated by the light of understanding. As she ascended the cellar stairs, the world around her felt anew. The air was lighter, rejuvenated by the release of the spirits that had long suffered in silence. She'd faced the darkness and emerged victorious, a guardian of the legacy that still lingered. Stepping into the corridor, she felt the warm sun filtering through the windows, illuminating her path, a promise of hope, a glimmer of possibility. She was no longer a prisoner of fear. She was a seeker of truth, embarking on a journey that would unveil not only the history of the Norwood Estate, but the intricacies of her own heart. As Olive emerged from the cellar, the newfound light of the day felt like a fresh beginning, a promise that the darkness she had just faced would not claim her or her family ever again. The eerie quiet of the Norwood Estate now seemed more like a dormancy, a sleep held in abeyance rather than an ominous veil. With the notebooks of shadows tucked under her arm, Olive ascended the worn staircase and wandered into the living room. It felt alive with a gentle hum of memories now freed from their torment. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the dust motes swirling lazily in the air, as if releasing the weight of generations gone by. Pushing away the exhaustion that threatened to envelope her, Olive settled onto an old, creaky chair and opened the notebook once more. The pages, now drenched in resonance, appeared to vibrate with energy as if inviting her to discover the threads of her lineage. She sought insights from the notes scrawled in her ancestors' hastily penned script, seeking clarity about the burden she had inherited. Your lineage is a tapestry woven with courage and despair, one passage read. Each generation has faced the dark whispers, trapped between worlds, bound by duty to confront what has come before. Olive felt the weight of those words. She was not the first to wield the power of choice, nor the first to grapple with the darkness. Many had come before her, and she understood now that she stood on the precipice of something grander than merely confronting an entity. She was part of an enduring cycle, a legacy that pulsed through her veins, connecting her to those who had fought and ultimately fractured the chains of bondage. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to Storyational, where every story takes you deeper into the shadows. Your support helps keep the fear alive, and trust me, there's so much more to uncover. Now, let's step back into the darkness, shall we? As she flipped through the pages, she sensed a profound pull toward a particular passage that spoke of the Weavers of Shadows, a clandestine group of family members who had sought to both bind and face the darkness. They understood that knowledge was not just power. It was a protective shield, a means to unravel the sinister. The Weavers believed in forging destinies. Olive read, her heart racing. Through the threads of their stories and sacrifices, they sought to restitch the fabric of their reality, pushing back against the void and reclaiming their legacy. Olive realized then that she too could step into this role. With each chapter of her family's struggle laid out before her, it was not just a narrative of sorrow, but of strength and redemption. She could weave her own story, infusing it with hope and the light of those whose lives had shaped her own. The mention of artifacts caught her attention, items that belonged to her ancestors, imbued with purpose and power. In these artifacts lies their truth, she noted, tracing her fingers along the margins filled with desperate scrawls, the remnants of a forgotten ritual, Determined, Olive decided it was time to dig deeper into her family's past and unearth these artifacts. The remnants of her ancestors' sacrifices held the potential not only for clarity, but for healing, both for herself and the lingering echoes of anguish trapped in the shadows. Grabbing her backpack and the notebooks, she set out to explore the estate further, her spirits buoyed by the knowledge that she was not alone. Each room had likely been touched by the strife her family faced and bore witness to their resilience. The Norwood Estate harbored secrets yet to be uncovered, and within those secrets loomed her connection to a world beyond understanding. The first place that came to mind was the attic. It was a space she rarely ventured into after she moved back home, confined beneath layers of dust and forgotten memories. As a child, it scared her, a realm untouched by time, a sanctuary of things once loved but lost. But now, with renewed resolve, she felt it might house the relics of her family's history. Climbing the stairs to the attic, Olive felt a shiver of anticipation. The air grew heavier and warmer, thick with memories preserved beneath the layers of time. She hesitated at the door, unsure of the depth of what she might find, but a quiet voice nudged her onward. Inside, the attic unfolded like a forgotten world. Cobwebs clung to the rafters, and boxes were cast about haphazardly, their contents long lost. A few stray beams of sunlight broke through the boarded-up windows, casting a delicate glow upon the disheveled remains of a life once vibrant. She began rifling through the boxes, her heart racing as she unearthed old clothes, faded books, and ornaments that spoke of a time long past. Memories whispered around her, and she let them wash over her like a tide, each object a bridge to her ancestors. Remnants of their joys, their traumas, their victories. While her fingers brushed through the pile, they landed upon a small, velvet pouch. Curiosity piqued. She pulled it close and untied the drawstring. Inside was a delicate silver locket, intricately engraved with a pattern that seemed to shift like shadows. When she opened it, she gasped, a miniature portrait of a woman she recognized from the family photographs, a distant relative whose piercing gaze was both familiar and unsettling. Great-great-grandmother Eleanor, she whispered, the name rolling comfortably off her tongue. Olive felt an inexplicable bond with her ancestor, a connection forged through circumstances woven across time. As she turned the locket over, another item slipped free from the pouch. An old key, rusted yet intricately designed. Her heart raced as she examined it closer. It bore the same swirling patterns as the locket. What door does this open? She mused, knowing instinctively it was meant for something significant, something tied to her family's past. With locket and key in hand, she scanned the attic for clues, eyeing the assortment of old trunks and chests. Then, her gaze fell upon a weathered trunk carved with the same swirling patterns. Could it be? She whispered to herself, rushing towards it. The trunk was locked, but her heart thrummed with recognition. The key fit perfectly. With a turn, a satisfying click signaled the chest's release from its prison. Olive's fingers trembled as she lifted the lid, uncovering a trove of ancestral relics. Letters bound together with twine, a faded journal, and various trinkets that seemed to pulse with memory. Among the treasures lay yet another journal, this one wrapped in worn leather that emanated a sense of age and wisdom. Carefully, she unwrapped it and opened the cover, her breath hitching as she read the first few lines, script both fervent and passionate. My children, if you find this, know that the darkness is alive, and it feeds on our fear. But we are not defenseless. We must learn to weave our stories together, gathering strength from each other and facing what we cannot control. The entry flowed with urgent knowledge, detailing her ancestors' encounters with the entity that had plagued their family for generations. It spoke of rituals and sacrifices, the desperate clutches of torment, and finally, the palpable hope that emerged when they banded together. "This will help," Olive murmured, feeling the weight of responsibility settle firmly on her shoulders. "We've faced this before, and we can face it again." As she delved deeper into the chest, she felt a surge of anticipation and fervor, artifacts that seemed to breathe with life, encapsulating the dreams, fears, and strength of those who had come before. They had all been woven into the tapestry of her lineage, and she was now the custodian of that legacy. Suddenly, Olive stiffened, her instincts alert. A sound echoed from below, a soft echo that reverberated through the halls. Was it just her imagination, or did she hear the soft whispers of her ancestors guiding her, urging her to listen more closely? She stood, holding the key tightly, the locket resting against her heart. "All right, time to see what other secrets the estate may hold," she resolved, determination surging through her. With the artifacts gathered and fresh insights unfolding within her mind, she felt ready to piece together the puzzle of her family's past and confront the other remnants of darkness lingering in the corners of her soul. Stepping away from the trunk, Olive made her way down the stairs and into the corridor, her heart racing with possibility. The whispering seemed to guide her, leading her not just through the house, but into the very depths of her familial lineage. The Norwood Estate spoke in riddles and whispers, but she was prepared to listen, to unearth what lay within the shadows and illuminate the hidden truths of her lineage. Empowered by the legacies that bound them, she took her first steps toward a new chapter, ready to confront the past, reshape the present, and secure her family's future. Olive descended the staircase, the weight of her newfound knowledge pressing upon her, yet invigorating her resolve. With the locket and the keys safely ensconced in her pocket, she felt like a vessel for the voices of her ancestors, a conduit for the stories they had left behind. As she traversed the halls of the Norwood Estate, she could sense the house was waking up, shedding the layers of dust and neglect it had accumulated over the years. The air felt charged with energy, each footstep echoing like whispers of encouragement through the corridors. She decided her next course of action would lead her to the library, a place where she might uncover more about the weavers of shadows and the family members who had battled the darkness before her. The library, usually cloaked in an oppressive silence, welcomed her with open arms. Tall bookshelves lined the walls, and the musty scent of worn pages filled her nostrils. Olive felt at home here, surrounded by stories waiting to be unearthed. She moved purposefully, her fingers grazing the spines of dusty tomes, seeking the wisdom contained within their pages. That as she navigated the labyrinth of shelves, a particular book caught her eye, a large, leather-bound volume with intricate engravings that echoed those of the key and locket. Pulling it from the shelf, she noticed it appeared to be the family's history. Its title read, "The Chronicles of the Norwood Lineage." Flipping through the yellowed pages, Olive felt a flutter of excitement. This book didn't just narrate the events of the family's past. It was filled with handwritten notes, comments penned by family members over generations. She came across sketches of her ancestors, intermingled with illustrations hinting at the rituals they performed in their attempts to keep the darkness at bay. The deeper she went into the book, the more she uncovered. There were entries detailing successful confrontations with the entity that plagued them. Each family member crafted their own strategies based on wisdom passed down through the ages. Then she found a heart-wrenching entry from her great-grandmother, Lucia. "We attempt to guide our children away from the shadows, but the darkness knows us. It seeks to lay claim to our fears and binds us in unseen chains. We cannot allow it to consume us." Make sure to like this video and subscribe to Storyetional, where every story takes you deeper into the shadows. Your support helps keep the fear alive And trust me, there's so much more to uncover. Now, let's step back into the darkness, shall we? Olive's heart ached for her great-grandmother, who may have fought valiantly against the same malevolence she too had faced. The vulnerability and determination of her ancestors imbued her with a sense of responsibility to honor their struggles, to continue the fight they had waged. Then, buried amongst the entries, she stumbled upon a more cryptic passage. The words danced before her, an incantation that sent shivers down her spine. The threads of fate can bind or break, and only the one who holds the key may weave the final tapestry. To confront the shadows, one must first summon the memories trapped within. Summoning memories, a profound notion that resonated deeply with her. Olive realized it was essential to connect with the essence of those who had come before her, to explore the depths of their experiences. The light of their hope shone in stark contrast to the darkness that surrounded them, and she would need to call upon it. Closing the book gently, she resolved that she must conduct her own rite to summon the memories of her ancestors. The attic and its relics would serve as the focal point for this gathering, a sacred site to reflect upon the sacrifices that had paved her path. Returning to the attic, Olive felt the thrum of energy kick up at her approach. She arranged the items she had discovered, the locket, the key, the journal, and the trinkets neatly upon the table she had set up earlier. She lit a candle and imagined how her ancestors might have done the same, their faces illuminated by the flickering flame, casting shadows that danced with memories of joy and pain. Once again, she inhaled deeply, centering herself in the moment. Olive let each memory of her family wash over her, calling forth the names and stories she had discovered, the laughter, the tears, the victories, and defeats. As she began to chant the incantation she discovered from her great-grandmother, the air surrounding her thickened, swirling with the presence of her lineage. Soft whirs of energy flitted around her, making her heart race. "I call upon you, my ancestors," she declared. "Share your gifts of memory, your joys, and your struggles illuminate the path before me." The candle flickered violently, flickering shadows leaping against the walls like spirited figures reaching out to her. Olive closed her eyes, breathing deeply, allowing the ethereal energy to wash over her, saturating her with introspection. Images began to flood her mind, a tapestry of memories woven with echoes from generations. A woman wreathed in white, dancing in the moonlight, her joyous laughter soaring through the cool night air, then a man kneeling over a hastily drawn circle, chanting in an urgent whisper. Fear etched across his features as darkness loomed around him. Children playing, the sunlight streaming. Between the leaves, innocent laughter filling the air, a protective circle woven beneath the vastness of the sky. With each image, Olive's chest swelled with emotion. Her great-great-grandmother's struggle, her great-grandfather's courage, and the tenderness of those who supported one another as they bravely weathered the storms. They were threads in her tapestry, blending effortlessly to form the woman she was becoming. "Guide me," Olive whispered, feeling the remnants of their faces flicker inside her mind. "Let me honor your stories. Let me be the one who continues your fight." In that moment, a profound clarity washed over her. The reason she had been drawn back to the estate was not merely to confront the darkness, but to weave together the strength that had been so dearly forged by those before her. She could feel their presence, solid and fortifying, a guardian of the shadows who had guided her thus far. Just then, the shadows at the edges of the room began to shift, swirling along the walls as if drawn by an unseen force, forming patterns that whispered secrets of hope and warning. A figure emerged from the darkness, a swirling entity that took shape, forming a face she recognized. "Olive," the spirit breathed, its voice a melodic echo laced with familiarity and sorrow. "You've begun to understand." "Who are you?" she asked, her heart beating wildly. "I am Eleanor," the spirit replied, her form shimmering like starlight. "I have watched over you, guiding you through the veil of darkness and illuminating the path ahead." Eleanor's presence felt warm and protective, igniting a spark of recognition within Olive. You once were the locket, didn't you?" "I did, my dear. It is a vessel of our connection, a reminder that we are never truly alone. You possess the key now, the key to our legacy and the stories we must continue to weave." "What must I do?" Olive implored, her voice steady with conviction. "Gather our stories, ensure that the truth of our lineage is shared, and confront the darkness that clings to our past. Only through ignorance shall it have power over us. You have the strength of our ancestors within you, but you must use it to unveil the truth that lies buried within the estate." "I will," Olive promised, emboldened by Eleanor's presence. "I will share our stories and ensure they live on." "Remember," Eleanor added, her figure growing fainter yet resolute, "the shadows will always seek to obscure, but in sharing our truths, you will anchor yourselves firmly in the light." As her essence faded into the ether, Olive felt a rush of energy surging through her, an electrifying connection to her lineage. The remnants of the past mingled with her courage, guiding her steps as she sought to reclaim the narrative of the Norwood family. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to Story-essional, where every story takes you deeper into the shadows. Your support helps keep the fear alive, and trust me, there's so much more to uncover. Now, let's step back into the darkness, shall we? The flickering shadow at the edges electrified the air, clinging to the promise of the future she was determined to build. Olive stood resolute in her understanding. Her lineage's shadows would not define her. Instead, she would weave together their stories into a new tapestry, one that honored the past while illuminating the path ahead, a beacon of resilience against the darkness that threatened to overshadow her family's legacy. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to Story-essional, where every story takes you deeper into the shadows. Your support helps keep the fear alive, and trust me, there's so much more to uncover. Now, let's step back into the darkness, shall we? The remnants of Eleanor's ethereal presence lingered in the air as Olive steadied herself, her pulse thundering in her ears like a war drum. With a fierce sense of purpose coursing through her, she sat back down amidst the remnants of the attic, feeling the newfound warmth of her ancestors' love and courage. "Gather our stories," she murmured, echoing Eleanor's words. She recognized this was her call to action, not just for herself, but for every woman who had faced trials in silence, every soul whose sacrifice had almost faded into obscurity. It would be the stories woven from truth, vulnerability, and strength that would pull the Norwood legacy from the shadows and into the light. But her immediate task needed focus. Olive began to compile the artifacts before her. Each item told a different facet of her ancestors' tales. A delicate silver hairpin, possibly belonging to her great-grandmother. A rusted pocket watch etched with intricate designs. Faded letters dating back to when her family had first moved into the estate. She meticulously cataloged them, jotting down notes about their significance and how they connected to the narrative she uncovered in the chronicles of the Norwood lineage. As dusk fell around her, the deepening shadows of the attic cloaked her in an intimate sense of solitude. Olive felt re-energized, knowing she was forging threads of connection that traversed generations. The fear that once paralyzed her was replaced with an exhilarating determination. She was not merely a distant descendant. She was an integral part of this tapestry. With a flick of her wrist, she reached for the journal she had found earlier, the one wrapped in leather, and began to read more closely, jotting down emotions and occasions expressed within its pages. One entry stood out amidst the haze of memories. The darkness has a face, a trickster who preys on our vulnerabilities. But I know that together, we can confront it. We must gather when the moon is full, just as the weavers of shadows did before us. There we will find strength in unity and silence in our fears. Her heart raced. This entry hinted at a ritual, a gathering to confront the darkness. Could this be a connection to the weavers of shadows her ancestors had established? If they had crafted a means to confront their fears collectively, then surely Olive could honor that tradition by doing the same. The nights passed quickly as she read through the pages of the journal, piecing together the fragments of her family's story. Each revelation ignited a fire within her, fueling her desire to delve deeper into the estate's past and confront what lay hidden. Armed with her compelling findings, she decided it was time for a gathering of her own. This would not simply be a reunion. It would be a shared exploration, a chance for her family to reclaim their stories alongside her. The next evening, as the golden rays of dusk neared their end, Olive picked up her phone and began reaching out to her family. She called her mother, her cousins, and her aunt, inviting them to the estate for a night of remembrance and storytelling. Join me on the full moon. There's something I need to share, some truths I've uncovered, Olive urged, feeling a swell of anticipation ripple through her words. Her family readily agreed, although she sensed a thread of trepidation knitting itself into her mother's voice. That night, as shadows gathered around the Norwood Estate, Olive prepared the living room for the gathering, arranging a circle of cushions around the fireplace. She lit candles, their flames dancing playfully with each draft. The room became an oasis of warmth against the encroaching dark. When her family arrived, there was a palpable energy in the air, a mix of curiosity and anxiety. Her mother, Lisa, entered first, her demeanor reflective yet determined, followed closely by Olive's cousins, Clara and Jack, and her Aunt May, who wore skepticism cloaked in concern. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to Storyational, where every story takes you deeper into the shadows. Your support helps keep the fear alive. And trust me, there's so much more to uncover. Now let's step back into the darkness, shall we? Olive, what's all this about? Lisa asked, taking in the candlelit room with cautious eyes. The weight of Olive's previous experiences spoke volumes, and Olive felt a surge of determination rising within her. I've discovered a great deal about our family's history, about the darkness that has haunted us, she began, gesturing for them to sit. But I believe it's time we confront it together. Our ancestors faced this same darkness, and I think we owe it to them to honor their struggle. Jack furrowed his brow. Isn't that what you've gone through before? Why dig it up again? Because we need to know, Olive replied fiercely. It's not just about confronting the darkness, but reclaiming our stories. We can't allow fear to govern our lives. We need to empower ourselves with the truth of who we are. Clara nodded, her green eyes wide with understanding. What do you want us to do? We're going to share our family stories, reflect on what we've learned, and create our own ritual. We need to weave our truth into something that strengthens us. Slowly, the atmosphere began to shift. Lisa looked to her brother, Jack, then to her sister, May, whose expression softened. All right, Lisa finally acquiesced. If this is going to help us understand our past, I'm in. As the night unfolded, Olive guided her family into storytelling, inviting them to recall memories, some buried, some cherished. They shared laughter, teardrops mingled with reverberating silence, and Olive felt the weight of generations pooling like healing balm around them. Clara spoke of the stories their grandmother had shared, tales of resilience that seemed brimming with hope even amidst despair. Jack recalled the unsettling feelings that always surrounded their family reunions, feelings he had struggled to understand for so long. At the center of it all, Olive began to weave together the patterns that emerged, a shared tapestry that reflected both pain and joy. Finally, it was Olive's turn. Heart pounding, she revealed the frightening encounters she had experienced, the figures in the shadows, the chilling sensations that haunted her at night. Her family listened intently, their eyes wide, the weight of their collective experiences forming an invisible bond that only strengthened as she spoke. "I found artifacts and journals in the attic," she explained. "Our ancestors faced this too, but they came together to confront it. We must do the same." The fire crackled as the last of the sunlight surrendered to the dark. An energy filled the room, palpable, a sense of unity kindling amongst them that I end the climax of the gathering. Olive suggested they engage in a ritual to reclaim their narratives and confront the fears of the unknown. "We'll light a candle for each of our ancestors, honoring both their struggles and triumphs," she proposed. Her family stood, moving to gather candles from the mantel. Each candle represented a piece of their history, a tribute to the sacrifices that had forged their familial bond. They lit them one by one, watching the flames flare against the shadows that seemed to stretch towards them. Yes, they shared thoughts for each flame lit. A candle for the great-grandmother who'd faced the darkness alone, another for the grandfather who had battled fear with relentless determination, and one for Eleanor, who had passed the torch without hesitation. Olive felt an overwhelming sense of calm wash over her. "Together, we are the light," Olive stated, her heart swelling as she looked into the eyes of her family. "We honor our past, and with that honor, we shield ourselves against the darkness. No more will we allow it to divide us." Her words echoed in the air, weaving an unseen thread as the flames flickered and danced. They were gathered in a circle, a tapestry of shared strength, and together they reclaimed their histories. Across the room, the shadows began to recede, harmonizing with the light they had collectively summoned. Olive was no longer just a descendant of the Norwood lineage. She stood as a guardian of their stories, a weaver of hope against the encroaching darkness. The night faded into a warm embrace, the candlelight guiding them toward their shared destiny. Side by side, they turned their backs on fear, stepping together into the light.